Hello and welcome back to DCJ Gaming. Today I got a quick tutorial on how to do a really basic respawn function. It'll be really quick, really basic. If you got questions, just let me know. As a reminder, I do have a Discord, a really good place to go keep up to date with other tutorials I have, but also if you have questions or you want to see a new kind of video, really good place to put some suggestions. That link is in the description below. But anyways, I'll demo what I'm doing here. So when a player is dead and the player walks up on them, this widget will pop up, hold auto respond, and when you do that, it brings their health back. Now, I'm not doing anything with animations or really anything super complicated, but it's just to show you how this works so that you can embed it in your game. And I'll show too, when we go the other way, that was client to server, and then here is server to client. Boom. So now they're both at 50%. So this is a brand new third-person project. There's a couple things to start out of the gate, but first, if you're new to Unreal Engine, click these epaulets here, and just make sure you're playing in a listen server with 2 players. Just be able to test this. So out of the gate here, you need to create 2 widgets. So to do that, right-click, user interface, widget blueprint, and then click this user widget. It'll ask you for a name. Create one, which is, you can call it UI or WB, but health bar, and then another for WB respond prompt. So create these 2, and we'll start first with the health bar. This is just to have over the player's head, just so you can see their health. You might already have this. If so, you can skip this. But really simple. All I did is up here in the top right, I just switched this to desired. And then I inserted in a size box. Size box. And I made mine 150 by 25. This really doesn't matter. And then under this, I put a progress bar. So drag that down. And by default, I have my progress bar set to 0.5. We'll change this in game. A bar fill type left to right, mask. This is default. And then you can play around, do whatever color you want, but I chose this green. It doesn't really matter. Once you have that done, whoops, don't play. Just save that and you can close it. And now let's open up our WB response prompt. So this is the feedback I'm giving to the player that is responding, the other player. Make sure you have this to set to fill screen. And first thing you want to drop is a canvas panel. Under that, put a horizontal box, and then put in a text and another progress bar. So what I'm choosing to do, just for this example, is R will be the button I press for respond. So in your text, just put hold R to respond. And then to the right, do another texture progress bar. I did do something in here as well where I just put some padding. Right, by default it has none, and I don't know, I just put a little padding. So you can do or don't have to do. By default, I have this at a 0%, filling up left to right, and I've got this blue bar for the progress. That's really it for both these widgets. You can close these. I'm doing all of this within just the default BP third person character. You can do this in really whatever character you want. So there's 2 components we have to add, and I'll pull up the viewport. So first I wanted to add pull this down, the widget. So to do this, go to add components, the health bar more specifically, type in widget and click that. I have it as a child to my capsule component, but you should get something here. I have mine set to a height of 110. The most important part of this widget is the widget class. Set this to the widget we just created. So mine is UI health bar. And by default, your space will be world. I prefer this to be on screen. The difference is world, I can show you quick. Give this set to world. So everybody loads in. Right, you can see it, but it's only visible one direction. Versus screen, it's going to show for everybody and it'll always be visible. So for health bar, I think is what we want to do. The second thing we want to add is go to add a collision sphere. So click that, and I renamed mine to collision respawn. This is what's actually going to trigger. So when you get close enough to a player, this is what will detect that via collision, and then we'll prompt the widget for you to respawn that player. I set my size to 150, but you can do whatever you want. I have it as a child to our capsule component. And if you scroll down to the collision settings, this is important to work through. So you definitely want generate overlap events turned on. You can turn off, can characters step on. I switched my collision presets to custom, and I think this is probably preferred because the only thing we really want it colliding with is another player, specifically their capsule component. So I did custom, I did ignore all, and then just overlap for the pawn. The other thing just to double check is on your collision, right? I have the collision only. We don't need any physics collision, but we do need to query the overlap, and object type really doesn't matter. So add that in, set the size what you want, add in your UI, and now we'll flip over in the blueprint. So this is all default, except for a couple things. So let's start first with some variables. So first you need, well, you don't need this, but this is how it'll work. So you might already have a health variable. If not, just create one. Make it a float, a new variable, float. The way percentages work, or progress bars work, is by percentage, and it's 0 to 1. So by default, I'm doing my health at 1. That's just so I can easily put it in the widget, right? If you want your health to be out of 100, that's fine. Just know that you have to divide it to get a percentage to go into your UI. So for this tutorial, I'm just doing 0 to 1, but that's why I'm using 1. So health, float, 1. And for your application, make sure you change this to rep notify. And I'll walk through that quick. So the way rep notify works is it'll create a function for you, which will replicate it. So we'll fill this in just a bit, but just make sure you have this and you set your health to rep notify. Next variable to set is a Boolean variable. So creating a variable, I'm calling it isDead. By default, this is not true, and make sure you just replicate that. Another variable to create is another Boolean. This will also by default not be true and will be set to replicated. I call this respawn complete. So this is when you're responding to somebody, it's not true until you finish it, which we'll use that logic later. And then these two will fill in or we'll create here later. So let's go into our event begin play. First thing I want to do is set our health. So drag this out, set it to 1, and this will just more for some widget work. Again, we'll come back to the onRep health function, but this is the first step. And so the way I'm handling damage, quote unquote, is just P and O. So when I press P, I set my health to 1. I press O, I set my health to 0. So this is just how I'm quickly changing my health value for both players. You might have a different health, I would hope you have a different health strategy in your game, but this is just a really good way to debug. So something like this, P&L, works well. The other thing you should do is create a custom event. So just right click, custom event, add a custom event, and call this set health _s. This is how I denote events on if they're replicated or not. I do _s for running on the server, _c for running on the client, and MC for multicast. So this is where we're going to handle all of our setting of health. So create this custom event, have it run on the server, have it be reliable, and create an input that is a float value. So the way then this can work is when you press P, you then run this event to set your health to 1, and press O to run this event to set your health to 0. We'll come back to R here. Yeah, okay. We'll keep filling this out. So once you get this done, now let's go into our onRep notify health. So the way this works, just clean this up a little bit, is anytime you are changing your health, right, like from this event, or setting our health to a new value, it'll automatically run this function. So this is where I want to handle my health bar and these variables, which we use for our respawn. So yours probably just looks like this right now. So the first thing we want to do is update our health bar to our new health setting. So to do that, drag in your variable that we created for the widget and come off of this and get widget, this one right here. What this does is this gets the widget that is coming from the widget class that is assigned, which is the widget that we created at the beginning. Come off that and cast to the widget you created, was UI health bar. And from there, you can, actually, you might not be able to. So make sure when you come back into your UI health bar, this progress bar, check this for is variable. So up here on the top right, under the progress bar is variable. When you do that, you can get it directly from the cast. So I'm casting to the health bar. I'm coming off as typing in get progress bar. Now I can actually access this progress bar right through this function. And then all I'm doing from here is setting the percentage, set percentage to my health. So every time my health changes, this function runs automatically, and we're getting our widget, we're getting our progress bar, we're setting the percentage. That's what I'm saying for my health. That's why I'm running it 0 to 1, because percentages work from 0 to 1, right? 0 to 100%. If you're doing doing it a different way, let's say your health could be 0 to 100, then what you can just do is then divide it by whatever your max is, say 100, and that'll give you a percentage, and then you can plug that in. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I'm coming off of this, and we're just doing a quick check. So get your health and do a greater than 0, and then plug this into a branch. So what this means is if your health is greater than 0, you are not dead. So we want to set this variable for is dead to false. Right? Drag off, set false. If your health is 0 or less than, right, then you are dead. So that's how this logic works, and that's what this is doing. I have this coming off here just in case there's ever a fail on getting the widget for whatever reason. I still want to be able to do this logic for is dead or is not. So on this cast failed, I'm just rerouting this, skipping this because I can't access the progress bar because I'm failing to cast my UI. But I still want to do this, so that's why I have this in here. So that's the onRep health. Let's come back into our event graph. And so now let's start working on our collision. So basically how this is going to work is when we get a game, we'll press O, set our health to 0. And now we want a player to know that we are dead and then we need to be responded. And to do that, we're going to do that through collision. So I had you add this collision respawn sphere. You scroll down to the very bottom in the details here. There's an on component begin overlap and on component end overlap. Click both of the pluses here. Now create two events, right? On collision begin overlap and on component end overlap. So we're going to start first with the begin. So this is when we overlap with another player, or really any actor, but we're going to kind of filter that out. So the way I'm doing this is the first check I always do is just to make sure we're not detecting a collision with ourselves. And that can actually happen sometimes for whatever reason. So that's the first thing I do is I come off this other actor, whoops, and type in equal for equal, and then just right click and get a reference, whoops, not preferred languages, get a reference to self, and then just plug that in. So the first thing we want to do is check, are we detecting collision with ourselves? And then I come off this and I do a not Boolean, and then plug this into a branch. So what this is saying is it true that we are not colliding with ourselves? So if that's true, carry on. If false, that means we are detecting a collision with ourselves, and I don't want anything to do with that, right? So that's what I'm doing. Next is when we come off this other actor, you can type in get class. It's bottom under utilities. And then again, you come off this equal. And what I'm doing in here is I'm seeing, is this actor of a class that I want to be interacting with? And so because this collision detection is for respawning, I only want to be proceeding with actors that are of the class of the player character I'm using. So I'm using the BP third person player character class. So that's what I'm checking here. All right, so BP third person character. You might be using your own BP class, which is fine, and then you can just put that into here. So what this is saying is, are we detecting collision with a player that is not ourselves, and is that player or is that actor within the player class that I want to be interacting with? So if this is true and this is true, then we need to cast to our third person character. And then coming off of this, we can access the variables, and we're going to grab this isDead variable, which if you remember, we're setting off of this logic within our health variable rep notify. Plug that into a branch, and then if true, we're going to run this event, which we'll come to. So basically, I only want to be proceeding down the logic path if the player is not myself, if it is a player character, and if they are indeed dead. So create a new custom event and set this to be run on the server, and check this reliable checkbox, and add an input that is of your character class, right? So for me, BP third person. What we're basically doing is we're going to store a reference of the player that we are overlapping with. Now, the reason I'm doing this via an event versus just setting it up here is sometimes your collision can happen on the client side versus the server side. And so because I want to access this on the server, we need to set it on the server. So I'm doing this to ensure that this is always being set on the server. So once you create this event, and we'll come into this next, but create this event and create a variable, which is this one, player respawning, third person, and plug that in and make this reliable. You can then call this event here. So hopefully that makes sense. Create this event and call it here after we do all of our checks. Okay, after that, we want to now add in the widget that we created, right? This one, this respond widget. And actually, we'll have this up to, make sure in this progress bar, which I called progress bar respond time, make sure you click is variable in here as well, just so we can access it later. So if we are overlapping with a player that is not ourselves, that is a player character, and that is dead, now we want to add this widget to tell us that you can respond this player. So create another custom event and call it add respond widget. I'm doing _C. Actually, I forgot that up here, _S. _C for client, because this replicates, we want this to run on the owning client. And again, I'm going to check this reliable. By and large, widgets should always be run on the client side. And so that's why I'm running this through the client. Coming from the server, but actually executing on the client. So let's start first with creating a new widget or new variable now. It's creating a variable, and it should be of type WB respond prompt, which is this widget we created. You don't have to worry about replication here because we'll only be accessing this from the client side. So once you have this created, you don't have to worry about the replication. But go ahead and bring this in Git. And this is an important first step, and this is something I do with all my widgets, but right click on it and convert to validated Git. So the way this works then is it says, well, is this variable valid or is it not valid, right? Is it null or not null? What this prevents is adding multiple or several copies of this widget on top of each other, is the reason why I implement it. So what we do first is we get it, and if it's valid, that means we've already created this widget, and so I just want to remove it. I want to basically restart. So is valid, remove from parent. So come off this, remove from parent. And if it's not valid, then we'll skip it. So then we'll actually create this widget. So right click, create widget. Okay. And the owning player will be our player controllers. You just do get player controller. Good. And the widget we'll be creating is our WB response prompt. So put that in here. Then drag in your widget and set it to this return value, and then add it to the viewport. So again, the reason I do this is, I don't know, let's say you bump into 2 players that are dead. Well, this widget, if you didn't have this logic in front, it would pop up twice, which you don't want. You'd have 2 copies right over the top. So this ensures that you always only have 1 copy of this widget up at once, which is good. So once you have this event done, go ahead and add it to the end of this add player respond s. Okay, so now we should be having collision, detecting when players are dead, and you should have some means of setting your health. I'm just going to disconnect this for a second because you probably haven't got this, but it's a good time for us to just do a quick check. Okay, so on the right I have the client, the left I have the server. O sets my health to 0, P to 1. So when I interact, now get in range, you can see that this widget is showing up. And when the client dies, I have to reset the overlap. This player comes up, you can see the widget is showing up. So this is what yours should look like now. Right now, obviously the widget doesn't go away and you can't press R yet. Oh, that's coming next. Okay, good. So assuming that worked for you, the next piece we want to do is actually bring in our respawn event. So I'm doing R, so I'm adding this in. And if you're struggling to find these keyboard inputs, just do keyboard event R. Oops. Right, and you can click this. And so this is going to be maybe the more complex part of the video, but basically we need 2 different custom events, both running on the server. So create 2 custom events, called the first one respond time start underscore s and respond time end underscore s. For both of these, they should be replicated running on the server and check them reliable. So the way I have this working is as I hold R, this bar fills up, and after X amount of time, it fills up all the way, and then you respond to the player. If at any time you or release R and you're no longer holding it, it'll reset. That's just how I'm doing it. So because of that, I need to detect both the press and the release. Right? It's not instant, so we need to be detecting the held time. So when we press, we will run our respond time start S, and when we release, we'll run the respond time end S. Ignore this stuff at the bottom for now. So respond time start S. First thing we want to do is drag in our response or our respond complete and set that to false. And again, make sure you have this set to reliable. And then we're going to run a timeline. So to bring a timeline in, right click and do create timeline. Was it add? Yeah, there we go. Add timeline. And I'm going to call this timeline respawn time. Okay, let's double click this. So first add a track that is a float track. So click track, float. And I'm setting mine to a length of 3. So this is 3 seconds, right? So if you want response time to be 10 seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds, you can set it to whatever you want, but I'm doing 3. We're going to need 2 keys. So the way you add a key is you right click and add a key. And then if you click on this little key here, you can see this time and value. Set 1 just for 0, 0, like I have down here, 0, 0. And then add another key and set it to time 3, value 1. Right now, if you're doing 5 seconds, and set your time to 5, 1. But have your values range from 0 to 1. Don't go bigger because we're going to use these for percentages. And your time can be whatever you want. And once you have that set, you can close this. Come back to our event graph. And you should have something that looks like this now. Oh, one more thing too. Yeah, you can name your float track. I named mine response timeline. So I can see that output here. But you should have a float output. That's really all you need. So when we press R, we're on the response time start S. We set our response complete to false. And then we want to play from start. So this is important. If you just plug this into play, then if you're holding R and then you release it and then you come back and hold it, it'll pick up from where you left off. Maybe that's what you want, but for me, I want you to have to hold it for a continuous 3 seconds without a break. So that's why I'm doing play from start. So if you're responding to something, an enemy comes up, you got to run away, and then you come back. You got to reset the timeline. So I'm doing play from start. And we'll come back now down to here on the response time end. First thing we're going to do is just check, is our response complete branch? If true, then plug that into the stop. Then the false, we're going to do something else. So you should have this, and your timeline. I'll start filling all this in a sec. So the next thing we need is to update our response WB on the client side. So come back down to our widgets. You should have this add respond widget C doing all of this. We want to create a new custom event that we run on our owning client again. So replicates run on owning client, set that to reliable. This event will be updating the progress bar within our health bar, right? This, right? It will be updating this. So first thing you want to do is get a reference to our widget and do the validated get and just make sure that, well, it's valid and we can actually access it. And coming off the reference to it, get our progress bar response time, and then drag off this and set percent. Okay. And for this event, make sure you have an input that is a float, and then plug this percentage into the event. So when we run this event, we'll be feeding it the percentage to update on the progress bar. Whoops, and when I was showing you this health bar, but it's really, it's for this. So it's showing you as the healer, the person responding, the other player, right, your progress on healing. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so once you have this done, let's come back up into our timeline area. So let's fill it in here quick, but on the respond time end. So if response is complete, if true, all right, stop the timeline. But if it's not complete, meaning you release the release button before the timeline was done, right, 3 seconds, then we're going to call this update response respond WB client event, and we're going to set it back down to 0. So this is what I'm saying is every time you release it without successfully reviving the player, it's a restart. So that's what I'm doing with this. Let's come back over to the right. So you have an update and a finish. So first, as this timeline is running, we want to update our progress bar in the widget. So come off this update and do update respond WB client at the same event over here and plug in your response timeline. So what this is doing is time is going along this line here, and right, each of these points has a return value. So we're going to feed that into our widget through this. So on the update, come to here. There's also a node coming off called finish. So when we reach the end of the timeline, this node will fire. So when this finishes, we want to set this respond complete now to true, right? Which drives this logic over here. So set that to true. And then let's bring in our reference to the player that we're responding, that we're getting through our collision, all right, through this event. Do the validated, and then set their health, right, which is this event that we created at the beginning, this set health S on the server. I'm setting their health to 0.5. So basically what I'm saying is when you get responded, you don't respond with full health, so I'm setting it to 0.5, but you could do 1, or you could do 0.75, you do 0.25, whatever you want. I'll plug in 0.75 just for demo purposes, but plug in whatever you want here. And then we got to create one more event. So once that's done, we have successfully revived the player. Come back down to where we have our widgets. Create a new custom event. It replicates runs on the owning client, is reliable. Let's get a validated reference to our widget response or respond widget. And then if it is valid, remove it from the parent and then set this variable to null, right? So all you do is just set, leave it blank. Right, by doing this piece, we get it off our viewport, right? Because we've successfully revived the player. But also, when we go back through it again, right, it will then return as not valid and create. So that's why I usually try to nullify these widgets. So then once you have that done, come back up to your timeline area and then drop that in here at the end. So now let's go back and test. What you should be able to do on both your server and client now is let's have the server die, let's have the client run up on them, widget shows up, and as I hold R, I can see the widget filling up, and then it disappears off my screen, and you can see the server now has 75% health. That's showing up for both sides. When I kill the server, let's kill the, oops. Okay, now when I kill the client, have the server run up, hold R, boom, good, works for both. Okay, so the last piece I want to do, actually maybe let me show you this. Right, this guy dies, server runs up, see the widgets here? When he runs far away, right, let's say an enemy comes up, you gotta fight the enemy or whatever, this widget is really annoying. So what I want to then implement is, well, when you move away or out of this collision circle or sphere that we added, get rid of that widget if it's up. So you should have an event that's on component end overlap. I'm going to steal the same logic we got up here, right? Like, are we colliding with ourselves? Is this actor of a BP third person? So you can just copy this from here, paste it down here, right? Same initial logic. And then all we're going to do is, if we are no longer, actually, I'm going to add one more thing even than what I had. Just going to drag this down. Actually, drag this over. What I want to do, right, is if you're running away from a down player like that, at some point, get rid of the widget. So you can just call your remove respawn widget right at the end of this logic, which will run this we just added. But what I was thinking about is if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 players or whatever, more than 2, What you don't want to have happen is this actor that is just left your sphere, are they not the player you're respawning? Because what could happen is if you're respawning a player and then another player comes in, runs by you and then runs away, it will trigger this. So we want to make this actually a little bit more specific than I was actually doing. So what I'm going to do is we're going to bring in our player respawning, get it, and prior to running this, actually, we can just kill all of this, I think. And we can just do, is this other actor equal to the player respawning? And if that is true, then run this. There. I think that'll look a little bit better. Okay, let's test that. Kill the server, bring in the client, shows up, goes away. Good. And let's do it the other way around. Client comes in, boom. Or server comes in, client, boom. Good. Yeah, so that's really it. Hopefully you're able to follow along with that. But yeah, really simple respawn method. I mean, in your game, right, you probably want the player to, fall down, reg all of it when they die, and then stand back up. But this is just to kind of show the basics of how to implement a revive system. And actually, I think I'm going to do one more thing too. I was thinking about that's been kind of bugging me as we were testing. The way the collision works is as you move in, it triggers. As you move out, it triggers. But if a player dies next to you like this player doesn't know because, right, until they re-overlap. Actually, one more thing too. On this UI health bar, yeah. All right, UI health bar, type in collision, can character step on, check that to no. And I'm just going to switch my collision to custom, ignore all, no collision. I noticed one of the cameras was bugging from hitting this widget. But anyways, as I was saying, the player doesn't know that they're overlapping with another player when they're already within the same circle. So we can implement in the same kind of logic, but do that to cover the scenarios where a player dies in really close proximity to another. And I gotta think how to do this. I think it's just, if you pull this in and get it, and then get overlapping, so drag in your collision respawn, get overlapping actors, do a for each loop, plug this into the array. Oh, and the class filter, let's do third person. And then what we want to do is, I'm just going to copy a lot of this from up here. Actually, I don't have to worry about the class filter. I shouldn't even need to cast. Yeah, okay, no, I do need to cast. So this. So I'm just going to take all this, paste it. So I want to exclude any collision that we're having with ourselves. That could be happening for whatever reason. So that's going to be our first check. And then we're just going to check if the actor we are colliding with, or that we are currently overlapping with within our collision sphere, is dead. So I'm just stealing some logic from above. Okay, so is it not ourselves? True. Cast this actor to the third person character. Is that player dead? If true, then add the player to respawn. Okay, and so I think how do I want to implement this? So if we die, okay, I'm going to change this a little bit. So I come into your on rep health. So when we die, right, we're checking that here, on dead, check to true. I think is when we want to run this event. So I'm going to create a new custom event. And I'm going to call this check overlapped. And then run this on the server, reliable. We come back into our rep notify and off this is dead, check overlaps. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to see, are we overlapping with anybody that isn't ourselves? And then we can actually get rid of this because we are dead, right? So this is running when we're dead. So we just want to find any valid player that isn't ourselves that's next to us, and then have that player run the add player responding S. Ooh, and actually, I do want to bring back the. I'm going to bring back this is dead, but what I'm actually going to do is a not boolean is not dead, right? Because only a player that is alive can respond to us. So this is saying is it's finding all the other characters that are near us, that are not ourselves, that are not dead, and then have them add us. So I'm change this. I plug this into target. So we're running this event for that player. Now let's get a reference to self. Let's plug ourselves in here. So we're running this event for that player that's overlapping with us, and we're telling them that, hey, we need to be responded, right, and then run this event. So I think this should work. Let's check it out. Okay, so here's the server. Boom. Yeah, so server dies, and then he's telling the client, hey, revive me. Client revives, and client dies, tells the server responds. Awesome. Cool. Okay, now that is actually the end. Still some buggy. Oh, it's just the camera colliding with the other player. Okay. Yeah, so that's the end. Hope that was helpful. Hope that made sense. Again, I've got the Discord going. Great place to ask questions, share screenshots, all that. So please join. If not, please like the video, comment below if you get questions, and give me a subscribe. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching.